Hello. It is particularly fun that I am using technology to give this presentation to you about using technology. I'm going to be talking about how the advent of technology, which of course is so familiar to people who are part of Generation Y, is also a great benefit to the rest of us because it enables us to share internationally with our theory and our practice. I'm going to begin by thinking about then and now. When I was born, World War II was still running and they had rockets being sent over, but they had no way of knowing where they might land. Whereas now, of course, they can target these much more. But I would also be thinking about the benefits of sat-navs, how much easier it is for me now that I don't get lost when I go somewhere and I don't need a navigator because my sat-nav is giving me auditory and visual signals about where I need to drive. Also, in one of my early jobs, I used to prepare punched tape of chemical usage, which was then analysed by a computer that filled a complete building in London. Nowadays, of course, my mobile phone has more power in it than that complete building had. I can also remember when fax machines became very popular and standing there getting very excited about the fact that somebody on the other side of the world was putting some paper into a machine and now it was appearing in front of me. And now fax machines are fairly obsolete. Instead, we've got Twitter, WhatsApp, Instagram, and so on. I'm also thinking back to having had websites for some many years now. Most of my books now are available as ebooks. Most of my articles are available as downloads. And I'm the editor of an online scientific journal, which appears completely online, free access to everyone. All of our contacts with the authors, the readers, the reviewers are all handled online, no pieces of paper anywhere. So we've moved on quite a long way. I also think back about writing about the impact of technology and then how it has affected what I do. In 2009, I remember I wrote an article about online supervision, a chapter in a book actually that was called Virtual Coach, Virtual Mentor. A couple of years later, I wrote another chapter for another book, and by then everyone was referring to e-supervision. By 2011, I had also been running international webinars for some time. This had mostly been having them interspersed with workshops. Colleagues and I had gone to places like Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and been running workshops, and then been finding that this was far too time-consuming and also particularly far too expensive for the participants to keep bringing us across. So we began to intersperse them with webinars. And now, I now run regular webinars every month, which are genuinely international. We have people from many countries joining in, including even outside of Europe. We once had someone from the US who was actually Turkish, and she used to stay up all night so that she could talk to Turkish colleagues on these webinars. We did also have some people who were genuinely in the US. These webinars now repeat the same material as I provide on my regular workshops in the UK. People can do a mix and match process if they want, and eventually these lead to some qualifications for them, including university accreditation. And of course, I've just recently run something similar to that for the University of Ben-Hur, working completely with webinars and also through an interpreter, which is again fairly easy to do when you're working online. In that case, the interpreter was in the room with the participants, but I have run webinars where the interpreter is in one country, I'm in another, and the participants have been in several other countries. The benefits of having technological communication. We can raise professional standards even when there is limited access to professionals. It means we can access across countries to work with professionals. That also means that we get professional sharing across cultures. I've learned a lot from working with people in different cultures and realizing that the circumstances in which they conduct their professional work is quite different to what I've been used to. Technology is also making a difference globally because it's a way of challenging power. People having access to all sorts of information, people seeing what's going on in other countries, is a great way of them beginning to question what might happen in their own countries. And of course, that is all about increasing autonomy. As we share more, people see, particularly those in authoritarian regimes, that it does not have to be like that, that in other countries, things are operating differently, so that the internet is a great way of sharing this information. Some other benefits: ecology. There's no need to travel, so we're not laying down more of a carbon footprint. That also means that it saves money, saves time, means that participants do not need to travel necessarily to a venue either, not just presenters and trainers. We have search engines where we can find almost anything. Although I do sometimes have to remind people that for academic writing, Wikipedia is not really the source you should be given. By all means, find something in Wikipedia, but please go back to the original sources. We can also have far more professional contacts than we had before the internet existed. We can spend a lot more time chatting to each other online. We can also share things. Fairly often conferences can be run and they can be online, as can all the papers that come out of them. And professional services are more available. We can find coaches, mentors, therapists and so on in other areas of the world when there are none where we are, or where it would not be appropriate to find someone local, perhaps because we are too close to each other already. The other thing I notice is about operating internationally, not just organizations, but particularly professional associations. I'm involved with the Institute of Developmental Transactional Analysis. This is set up in the UK, but the bulk of the members are not within the UK. Because we have online meetings and sometimes email meetings, we can have elected representatives from all around the world, and they can meet and be the council or the steering group for the association. This makes it far more feasible to actually be international. We could not possibly afford the travel costs if we were trying to choose one country and then have everyone come there in order to have meetings. We do also have online conferences regularly now. We call them community gatherings, and we just run a day with different presenters with a large number of participants. Everyone can see everyone else on the webcams. People can discuss things, interrupt, ask questions whenever they want to. So it's really just like being in the room at a conference, with the exception that we don't have to do the travelling and it doesn't cost us money. Now, those are some of the benefits. What about some of the challenges? We need codes of ethics that cover online working. My experience has been that professional associations, certainly in the UK, have been doing this for quite some time. We need to think about how we use information that is obtained via social media. What do we show about ourselves on social media that clients or customers might see? What can we find out about clients or customers through social media, and how do we use it? There's another challenge about intellectual property. Because everything is being shared, there are some parts of the world where they just don't seem to have a concept of intellectual property or copyright, so that information is plagiarized basically and used, which does become a bit of a challenge. Having psychometric tests available can also be a problem. People can now take these without any expert in the test explaining things to them. That can be a bit worrying if they then score themselves and end up with some uncomfortable label like psychopath or narcissist when they don't really understand what that means. Big problem when the technology fails, of course. Part of why we're being safe here and recording this session for you. And internet addiction, something that never happened until we had the internet. But now therapists need to work with people because they are addicted to the internet, not just to the gambling pages, but also just to the social media and online sex offending. Again, another new problem that has come about, where people now can make contact with children with the wrong reasons, of course. Understanding the dynamics helps to work out what's going on with this idea, particularly if you're not part of Generation Y. Goffman wrote about frames and presence. He wrote about schemata of interpretation as the ways we look at the world and how these are really created due to our social and cultural environments. So, before Generation Y, we didn't have the internet. We now need to add the internet into our frame making. Rather like, for those of you who are old enough to remember, we once had to add telephones into our frames when they became ubiquitous, whereas before, people didn't have phones, or only rich people had phones. We need to learn to relate through virtual reality. More about dynamics. Neuro-linguistic programming gives us the concept of representational systems: visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Now, if we are used to using intuition and empathy, then we are using the kinesthetic channels for picking up information. Obviously, if the person is in another country and you are only seeing them on a screen, we need to learn to use more of the visual and auditory systems to pick up the kind of information we need. That might be a problem for some, but it is also an advantage, because it means that there tends to be far less transference than when we are working face to face. There are fewer strong emotions exhibited when people are working online than when they are present in a meeting. They tend to be more present with themselves, and therefore there is less regression. There is less about people feeling that they are small children again, or less of thinking that the trainer is the teacher where they used to be at school. We achieve mindfulness more readily, it seems, when we are connecting online than when we have someone in front of us. So, in conclusion, if you were born before Generation Y, you need to think about how you might make some changes to welcome the facilities that we now have. Think about how people believe that computers would take over all of the jobs. Yet computers did not create any unemployment. They actually mainly created more employment. So we now have a great opportunity with online connections to create worldwide professional communities. They can lead to more learning. We can develop best practices that are contributed to across different cultures, and hence everyone can be engaged in continuous development. Now, I have included for you my contact details because I am only appearing to you on the screen. I welcome contact from any of you. I've also prepared a paper which I think the organisers will be distributing as well. But please feel free to contact me with any feedback, questions, or anything else that you would like to discuss with me.